going to be talking about AQA, A-level religious studies, specifically Christianity. I think this is the philosophy of religion topic, and this is religious experience. I have done other videos, if you would like to see. I am not a teacher. I am but a lowly A-level student whose exam is in 3 days, and decided to just start revising now. So I've collated all this information in case you don't want to watch that annoying TikTok guy waffle on for hours. So yeah, let's go. So this is what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to try and get through it as quick as possible. Miracles, experiences, verification, science, responses, all that fun stuff. The first one is, what is a religious experience? So it's defined as a supernatural appearance that usually conveys a revelation. If you've ever watched Derry Girls, it's like when they think they saw the statue of the Virgin Mary crying. That was very funny. If you haven't seen Derry Girls, what are you doing? Anyway, first thing is the type of visions. There are main types of visions, and the first one is corporeal. And that means that you've seen it with your eyes. It is external to you. It's not happening in you, it's happening outside. You're viewing it happen. And, yeah, see, it's not in the mind, absolutely not. And it can be experienced by multiple people, which is something that can't be said for ones which obviously are in your mind. And usually it's in the appearance of a person, so you might see Jesus or Mary. And an example of this is Saint Bernadette. She saw the Virgin Mary at Lourdes when she was 16 years old, maybe? She might have been 14, actually. I don't remember. And she claimed that the Virgin Mary told her about the healing properties that were in the spring at Lourdes. And now Lourdes is actually a very popular pilgrimage destination for Christians because they believe that they can be miraculously healed because of what Saint Bernadette saw. And then there is imaginative. Now this one is with the mind's eye, which is like, I don't know, I guess like a third eye thing. So it's if you have it in a dream, right? If you ever had like a really realistic dream and then that actually happens a couple days later, it's kind of like that, I guess. So this one is purely internal. You don't see it outside. Like I said, it's usually, if you're sleeping, and it doesn't leave a physical trace other than maybe on the person who might, still see it when they close their eyes or whatever, but there's no physical proof that it happened. An example of this is actually in Genesis chapter 28, in the story of Jacob's ladder. Obviously, he fell asleep on the rock and he had the vision, and all was well and good. He felt God talking to him in his vision. And then there is intellectual, which involves an awareness of a presence. So this is kind of more like spiritual. It's like, I can feel God, And this does, though, give the subject kind of a special insight into God, or a revelation of some sort. So an example of this is in Acts chapter 11, when Peter felt God tell him that there was no need to follow the Jewish dietary laws anymore. So he came to realize something from his intellectual vision. And then there are experiences, which I think are a bit more complicated. So there's, first of all, the numinous, which, oh god, I hate this. So the numinous is an experience that arouses spiritual or religious emotion. Another way it's described is awe-inspiring. Like, they really like awe when talking about numinous experiences. An example of this would be Isaiah's commission, because he is gagged, okay? He's trembling, he says, the ground is shaking, and he's, crying out, saying, woe to me, because he is so shocked at what he's experiencing. He cannot fathom it. And this is something that Rudolf Otto speaks very highly of. He refers to numinous experiences as experiencing the holy other. So it's something fearful and fascinating. That's how he describes it. By holy other, he means it's something that you absolutely cannot begin to perceive. It's not something that you'd see down at your local Tesco, right? And he also says that these experiences give an insight into the mysterium, or the mystery, of God. And the mysterium itself is made up of two components. First one is the holy other, totally outside what you'd do on a day-to-day basis, and fascination. So the subject of the experience is like they are overpowered by the whole thing. They just like cannot like put their attention on anything else because, oh my god, like this is literally happening in front of them. And he also says that we can't understand the numinous because it's wholly other, right? We can't begin to understand it, but we can know something of it through the emotions that someone feels and maybe how they would try to describe it. As you can see, he says that we use our words, but obviously our words can't really encapsulate, you know. So he tried his best, and this is what he said. He said that the tremendum, which means fearful, which is a part of the experience, has three components. Awfulness. That's supposed to say awe with an e-fulness. I swear I wrote that. That's Google. That's not me, I swear. And that's like, you know, obviously you're in awe of the experience. It's crazy. Overpoweringness is that, like, you may feel, like, really small, like, really... I'm not sure the word, sort of like incomparable to, you know, this divine nature of the universe, you know, like you feel really insignificant. And then energy and urgency it's like providing you with this information. And in some cases, it might result in a conversion. Most famously, St. Paul, or back when he was known as Saul, on the road to Damascus, ready to chop some Christians' heads off, because that was his job, kind of, and he was described as being weak and trembling when he had his, because God was like, dude, I'm calling you to be one of my followers. So, there you go. And then, there are mystical experiences. Now, this is about a union with God. And it might sound kind of similar, but it's different. So, a mystic is someone who has a mystical experience, and they can uncover hidden truth through their experiences. So they can, like, find out things that you would never have been able to know before through God, through their experience. And two examples we have here, which, by the way, mystics usually happen to female saints. So, St. Julian of Norwich, she wrote about it in the Revelations of Divine Love, which was her book. You know, she talks about how everything that is made, it is from God's love. And then there is St. Teresa of Avila, and she says, I have been in God, and God has been in me. Not like that, you perv. And William James, he's a big fan of mystical stuff. So he wrote a book called Varieties of Religious Experience. And he felt that through being a mystic, you can gain insight into the ultimate reality. And that, however, for it to be a mystical experience, it has to meet all of this criteria. Ineffability, number one, is the inability to explain it to another person. Inability, even. So, you know, you can't even put it into words. You know, you're trying to explain it, but the other person's just not really getting the gravity of the situation because it is huge, okay? And then there's noetic quality. So it gives truth that can't be obtained. So it's like, you know, if they start saying, oh my gosh, I know all this stuff about science, but, you know, they could have just Googled it, well, then that's not a mystical experience. It has to be something that, like, no one else knows and you couldn't have possibly obtained that information unless you got it through God. Transiency is basically that the mystical experience has to be short. It can't be longer than 2 hours, but the person will remember it forever because it literally impacted their entire life. And then finally, passivity, which is feeling as if you were taken over by God. So you're no longer, like, in control of who you are. And someone else who talked about mystical experiences is Walter Stace. I couldn't find a picture of Walter Stace on the Google Slides images thing. Instead, it gave me Stacey Dooley, so enjoy the picture, which appears to be a very old picture of Stacey Dooley. Anyway, the first one he said was extrovertive, which involves looking at the physical world and feeling a sense of unity. Now, he didn't actually really believe that those were mystical experiences. He thought that this was the true one, introvertive. So, this is once again kind of more spiritual. It's like looking at yourself and feeling the union with God. That's what he calls the true religious experience. Now, of course, you can't just like believe anyone and everyone who talks about religious experiences. So, how do you verify them? Well, that's the problem. The first guy, this bloke, I'm gonna go with Aya. I'm gonna go with Aya. He puts forward the problem of verification. So he says that all religious language is meaningless because it cannot be verified. So therefore, all religious language when talking about a religious experience is meaningless. Because, you can't definitively say for sure that God is there, so technically it's meaningless. He did say that it was an interesting from a psychological point of view, which kind of feels like a dig at everyone who ever experienced something like this. And then there is the point of religious experiences. They're not often corporeal in the sense that everyone else can see it happening. That's pretty rare. So if it's private, if it's in your mind through the mind's eye, well then you might interpret it wrong, or it's subjective, the whole shebang. Another thing is that it's indescribable, which we kind of touched on before, in saying that it's hard for us to use our words because we can't fully understand or even like begin to explain what happened. We can only try our best, and that's not very accurate. And also, it's the kind of thing of, well, who's right? Because if Christians can see Mary, Mother of God, while Buddhists see Buddha, then that suggests it's not real. It's all in the mind, you're just seeing what you want to see. But it can be, worth noting that the experience can still be meaningful, even if it's not verifiable. Now, here are some specific scientists who challenge religious experience. Who would have thought that science isn't compatible with religious experience? Not me. Anyway, neurologist V.S. Ramachandran, he did studies on temporal lobe epilepsy and the relation to religious experience. So, he was all about epilepsy. I don't know anything about it, unfortunately, but you don't need to know all the ins and outs. So, he believed that figures who had religious experiences, like St. Paul, may have been suffering from this type of epilepsy. But it is important to note that he actually didn't believe that this disproved religious experiences, as you would think. He thinks instead that some brains are more susceptible to having one. And then there is Michael Persinger, this lovely man right here. He created something called the God Helmet, which passes electromagnetic energy to the subject's temporal lobe, which kind of sounds like man-made creations beyond incomprehensibility. It's quite terrifying, isn't it? But yeah, he basically said that oh well, this happened and they felt like they were having the religious experience when in actuality it was just like the electromagneticity, and so technically anyone can simulate the feeling of a religious experience. Now, another one is LSD. Basically, in 1966, a bunch of theology students carried out the Good Friday experiment, where they took a bunch of acid and they were just off their face, right? Well, half of them did. The other half were given a placebo, and basically the outcome of the experiment was that people who take a load of drugs, which a lot of people did in the 60s to the 80s, and then report religious experiences, it's just the drugs. But not everyone is Duncan on these. Richard Swinburne, he wrote the book The Existence of God, and he is all sunshine and rainbows, okay? This guy's life is sugar spice and everything nice. He says that we should accept events which happen to us, unless we have a good reason not to. So, if you took a bunch of LSD, and then you had a religious experience, you might be like, well, maybe I shouldn't believe that that actually happened because it was probably just the acid. And he called that the principle of credulity. Oh, hello, ignore that. And he also put forward the principle of testimony. So basically saying we should believe others because there's probably not a good reason not to, right? Unless you know that person is diagnosed schizophrenic, then you should believe them if they're telling you that they had a religious experience. Because like, why not? So that is all. I hope that helped. Thanks for watching.